Welcome to today's Adweek webinar. On today's webinar, we'll be discussing driving foot traffic and incremental sales. I'm Ryan Hoover, the Vice President of the Branded Studio here at Adweek, and we want to thank you for joining today's webinar sponsored by GroundTruth. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. We're happy to be joined by Jesse Hamilton, Sales Director at GroundTruth, who will help lead our discussion today. Jesse helps brands and agencies turn their digital media investment into real business results. Joining Jesse today will be Oliver Perez. He's the CMO at Duke Cannon. With over 2 decades of experience, Oliver is a visionary marketer leading Duke Cannon's growth in the men's grooming industry. And lastly, Katie McMahon, the Associate Director of Strategy at Croud. With a decade of experience in digital marketing, Katie drives strategic growth for brands like Nespresso, Free People, Figs, and Zio Skincare at Croud. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Jesse, I'll kick it over to you to take us away.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks again to Adweek for hosting us and giving us this opportunity to showcase all the amazing momentum and success Duke Cannon is having. I've had the privilege of seeing it all firsthand, partnering with Katie and the Croud team, and they've really been integral in fueling that momentum. I think last week, the 3 of us established very quickly we picked the right careers in marketing because we can sit here and talk for hours about all this. So without wasting any time, let's get right into it. Oliver, I know Duke Cannon really scaled up as a D2C brand and then later pivoted to being sold in major retailers like Walmart and Target. So if you don't mind giving us a bit more background on Duke Cannon's evolution and how you got to where you are today, just to set the stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you to Ryan and the Adweek team. Thank you, Jesse and Katie. Just very excited to be here and kind of share a little bit of the story of Duke Cannon, some of the things that we've been up to. So you teed it up really nicely. So Duke Cannon, for those of you guys that don't know, is a men's personal grooming brand. Started about a decade ago, and really grew out of this idea of like how do we position ourselves as a authentic men's grooming brand that talks to and engages with men the way that men talk to each other. And in doing that, we really leaned heavily into growth through D2C, which allowed us that one-to-one interaction and really go after those guys and drive that business. As we started growing, we found that we wanted to be where our guys were shopping. So that was a little bit more of a non-traditional sales channel. So going to places like Ace Hardware, Cracker Barrel, Duluth Trading Company, Lowe's, like really thinking about where men were actually shopping. And in order to break through, we really became this discovery brand. So we leaned very heavily into telling brand stories through our packaging and really becoming this brand that you got to discover. We had some great success. It's really taken us a really long way. But we're reaching a pivotal point in our brand's evolution. As we start trying to scale up, we want to be a massive brand. We want to be in as many households in America. And to do that, you really start having to play in the places where people are shopping. And so that's evolved our next step in our distribution journey to get into more of the FDM channel, so food, drug, and mass. So try to be where the people are actually shopping. And what we've started finding and what we've learned, as a lot of D2C brands have learned in their evolution, is when you start showing up in these more mass scale retailers, you now have to make the pivot from being a brand that is discovered, that is maybe a little bit more niche and special, that is, you feel part of like the community, you feel in on the secret. So we want to become a brand that is recommended. And when your brand is recommended, you need to drive findability, you need to drive awareness, you need to drive household penetration. And so that's really the critical point that we're at within our journey. And so we've been doing a lot of work over the last few months. And we brought on Croud about 6 months ago to really help us start rethinking how we thought about our media mix to help us achieve those goals. Because at the end of the day, I want to have more people coming into the Duke Cannon country, experiencing the brand, and really start telling their friends. And we really need to broaden that lens and that aperture of who we go after and how we get them to really drive that attribute or acquisition, really how they drive those sales and really start discovering our brand in new places. So it's been a really fun journey over the last 9 months or so that I've been here.
I love that. And just a quick follow-up question there. I'm sure a lot of people here have some similar pain points when it comes from going offline are going online to offline. So what have been some of the initial challenges you face when it comes to having a presence, not across just one retailer, but multiple retailers that might be delivering a little bit of a varying customer experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, it's the thing we wrestle most with almost every single day, right? When you're online, you can have more of that very laser focused, targeted conversation, right? You have your community, you have your social channels. In the older days of Meta, you could get hyper targeted and really reach those consumers and drive that one-to-one interaction. And you're directly driving them to your retail site and driving that loop, right? You can leverage things like email marketing. As we start scaling up, you're really trying to go after a broader audience. And the biggest challenge is like, how do you segment your consumers to make sure you're going after? We've had to do a lot of thinking. That's where really Croud has helped us with a lot of segmentations, a lot of like thinking about how do we take that same idea of finding the people that are most apt to want to buy our products, but find them in the physical world, right? And how do you start demonstrating that you can drive foot traffic and that you can drive retailer sales? Because as you start playing with the big boys, the Targets, the Walmarts, the Krogers of the world, right? Like they want to make sure that you are adding value, that you're bringing consumers into their stores. And so that's where we start focusing on like, what does the Duke brand do? Who is that consumer? Why is that valuable to somebody like Target or Walmart or Kroger or Lowe's or whoever it might be? But we have to be smart about it, right? We don't have unlimited resources. And so we have to be extremely efficient with every single dollar that we spend to make sure that we feel like that's actually driving impact, that's actually helping us convert a sale, that is helping us tell that story to continue to build this brand.
I love that. And I think it's a perfect segue, Katie. Oliver just brought up, this is where Croud comes in. I think Croud is really known as an agency that drives growth for brands through reinvention as they're going from online to offline. So I'd love if you could expand a little bit more on how you started bringing in new media partners as you started this partnership with Duke to support these outcome-based strategies. When you first kicked off the partnership, I know specifically GroundTruth was involved in a GeoLift test back in Q4. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts there.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to supporting that outcomes-based planning framework, it really starts by understanding the audience, as Oliver alluded to. So we have a suite of tools that we use that dives into the attitudes and the behaviors of all of these consumers. In that research, what we found was that about 70% of Duke target addressable market actually prefers to buy those personal care products in the store versus online. And so while D2C is powerful, it's necessary, it's that laser focus like Oliver was just talking about, it's not the entire picture. And so we looked for what those different steps a user was taking along that journey to purchasing in store. From this, we found over 70% of shoppers use their mobile devices even to purchase these products in store. And a lot of times that's used for those price comparison purposes, but that's where we wanted to be. That's right at that crucial point in the user journey. And so we explored different partners that could help us achieve that really valuable placement. And that's where we landed on working with you, Jesse, and the team at GroundTruth, who not only had that functionality to facilitate Duke being in that moment, but also to track really important data like store visits to show the actual impact. And we were also able to layer in all of those different audience attributes to make sure that it was a qualified audience, not just everybody going to these retail locations.
I love that. And it is so true. It's all about targeting the right audience across, the right channels with consistent messaging to get those better results. I am interested, just to pull the curtain back a bit more, you mentioned leveraging specific tools. So outside of GroundTruth being able to showcase foot traffic attribution, and then we also saw a really great sales lift, on our campaign, 12%, in Walmart. What other tools were you leveraging to validate that these initial tests were successful?
Yeah. So from an audience tool perspective, we use YouGov very prominently in terms of developing what that audience looks like in terms of that actual architecture. But then while store visits gave us a glimpse into the behavior that we didn't have before, it was also crucial for us to understand what the impact on revenue was going to be also. And so with Croud's advanced analytics team, we ran a GeoLift study test. The team went through weeks and weeks of store sales data to kind of determine what the right test group would be, what the right holdout group would be. And so we isolated out those DMAs for an 8-week test, just to get that statistical significance, make sure that we were really confident in those results. And yeah, as you said, what we understood at the end of running that test with GroundTruth was that we saw an almost 6% incremental revenue overall, but specifically in Walmart, where Buchanan's products are placed differently than in other retailers. It's in the natural section. People may not know where to look for Buchanan. And within Walmart, we saw almost a 12% lift in incremental revenue. So at that point, it was really clear that this was a tactic that we want to keep going after and keep consistent on our media plans moving forward.
Yeah, it's almost like I bribed you to say this.
Almost.
I think perfect. But Oliver, going back to you, I think we've kind of established Buchanan now as a brand. You've done the work to be recognizable in this space, and now you really need to double down and focus your upper funnel strategies, not just to grow your brand, but then to differentiate yourself among your competitive set. So I'm curious how Buchanan's handling that, and what I'd say is a pretty crowded space of male grooming products.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like when the brand began, right, we were one of the pioneers starting to look at men as their own audience and their target, and evolve them from just using whatever was in the shower. But there's fierce competitors out there, and so that's really forced us to be sharper and be a little bit clear about what our point of view is. And so we've spent the last 4-6 months like really refining that and building a lot of strategies to address that. So it starts with a few things. So one of the things that we've done is we're about to launch a brand new packaging architecture, fresh new look, same great Buchanan, new shirt. And really this is all about driving that findability and breakthrough in the store. As I mentioned earlier, right, when we started, we were much more of this brand that you discovered. But if you become a brand that is recommended, you need to be able to spot that brand right away. So we've leaned very heavily in some of the marks that we've built and some of those assets that the brand has built, our big Block D, some of our fragrances, and really lean into that. As part of that work, we've also brought on a new creative partner. So we've been working with an agency called Quality Meats, and they've done some tremendous work with us. And we're really, really excited. I don't want to give away too much, but we've got some very exciting new creative coming to life here in market very, very soon. And what that's really allowing us to do is better define our platform and our playground, right? What does Buchanan stand for? How are we encouraging hardworking men to really get out there and find ways to leverage our brand in new and unique and fun ways? So we've got some exciting things coming. So that's where it starts pushing us in that upper funnel. But we can't lose sight of the fact that we still need to drive that conversion, right? We still got to pay the bills. We still aren't at a place where we have broad reach awareness, where I would guarantee that if I were to poll the folks on this call, there's a lot of folks that this is probably the first time that they're learning about Buchanan, and we need to change that, right? And so that's where you need that balance of those lower funnel metrics, where you know the people that are receptive, you know the people that have been buying you. Let's continue to drive that conversion, but let's start pushing up that funnel. Let's start driving purchase intent. Let's start driving consideration. Let's take a few shots and start pushing further into that awareness bucket and do some things that get us noticed and get us talking about the brand. And that's really what I've been tasked to do, is like, let's make sure that Buchanan continues to have the swagger that we've always had, and really get out to the world and do things that people take note of. So I'm very excited about what's coming. I think once folks start seeing it, I'm confident that people are going to start noticing, and you'll take that second look when you're walking down that aisle at Target and seeing that big Block D.
And it's so exciting being a part of this repackaging. And Katie, your team is extremely involved in this. And last week we were all talking about, there's kind of this idea right now that you have to choose between either growing your brand or focusing on performance marketing, but really brand and performance can be hard to operationalize when the two operate as if they're independent. It's not either or anymore. It's this both and approach that really sets up successful campaigns. So I think what's been cool working with your team is we really are combining brand building tactics with performance-driven strategies to drive these measurable outcomes like foot traffic and sales, right? So going back to now you have this repackaging, you're focusing on building the brand where they have to recognize Buchanan in a bit of a different way, but it's at the forefront now. So how are you pairing that with also this evolution of the Buchanan customer? You've really been tasked with finding this new wave of customers as those purchasing behaviors are also shifting. So can you just go into a bit more kind of on how you're showing up now with this repackaged launch, how you're showing up in front of the right audiences, and then knowing that audience segmentation isn't really possible across traditional channels. How are you taking that and figuring out where to invest your media dollars now for Duke-Cannon?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it comes down to creative at the end of the day too, right? And so like Oliver mentioned, Quality Meats team has done a really great job in building what that brand platform looks like. And then it's evolving that to fit the right messaging on the right platform. So for us, as I alluded to before, like all of our audience segments do have differing in terms of their consumption, but all of them are living on mobile in some way, shape, or form, living on CTV in some way, shape, or form. So this has really like brought us an opportunity to bring, like you said, those multiple different media types into the fold. So we started with those mobile banners, which was great. And the GroundTruth team has really helped us, especially with this repackaging, to turn that into a really like small way to show a really important message. Because obviously if it's on a mobile device, you have to say it and say it loud in that small space, but then also bringing that into environments like CTV, environments like audio, where we know that consumers are spending time there as well. So it's really just understanding the indexing and where they're actually consuming that media, but also evaluating that next to the white space. And is it really loud? Are we going to be just in a really overpopulated area where all of our competitors are kind of saying the same thing multiple times? Or can we find that pocket where we know that our audience is living that is maybe a little bit untouched? So it's kind of that balance there of still being able to compete with our loud voice too, but finding those pockets where we can win.
If I could just add a couple of things on that, I think what Katie said is spot on. I think this also gets back to our evolution as a brand, right? Of like being sharper about segmenting all those groups, right? And this is where the blend of art, science, and strategy start all coming together, right? There's the art and the creative, and do we have the right message? There's the science and the measurement, but there's also the strategy, right? So when we've been D2C, it's been a conversation more to men because you know you can drive that conversion because you're driving them straight to the site. But now as we start scaling in other channels, we know that it may not be the guy that's shopping, right? There might be a partner that's involved. And so now we have to start testing the message. Now we have to start thinking about where do we flight that creative? How do we really engage that partner to make that purchase? Because if it's now going to be a, hey, I need deodorant, can you pick that up for me? We need to make sure that like it also resonates with her and that she's, looking to pick it up. And so this is where Croud has really helped us with a lot of that segmentation and really helping us get smarter and sharper about saying, how much of our media do we need to go against each of those different audiences? How do we not swing the pendulum too far one way, knowing that we still need to bring this core loyal following along, and how do we lean into those things? And that's where we start playing around with a bunch of different messaging, right? Whether it's leaning hard into fragrance, that's a big point of differentiation for us, where we have big, bold fragrances that we know resonate with our consumers. But we also know that from consumer feedback, we know that the partners love that. We get tons of feedback. It's like, hey, I love how my guy smelled after using the Duke-Cannon product. So it's finding that blend and balance to make sure that we're talking to the right audience at the right time with the right message.
I love that. And I think everything's been so spot on that we've been talking about. It's first and foremost, who's the audience? Who do you want to get your message in front of? And then it's making sure you're creative and your message is directly tied to your end goal. What you want at the end of the day is that household penetration and getting Duke-Cannon in the hands of as many people as possible. So I'm curious too, as Katie and Oliver, either of you really, I know that as you start to figure out what is the healthy mix, where do you invest your dollars as you start investing in new digital channels, how does that look? I know, Katie, we in Q4, we kind of slowly soft launched CTV, made sure it worked and we saw a lift from it. And now that's a part of our 2025 strategies. So how are you looking at 2025 and beyond in testing some of these new channels like audio, for instance?
Yeah, I think from a planning perspective, it really comes down to being able to measure the impact, right? So not just turning things on and hoping that they work, but actually having the KPI framework set up at the beginning to say whether or not this is going to be successful. Everybody really aligned on what those outcomes should look like and kind of what we're set out to do. And then evaluating that after the fact and determining if it's the right addition and not adding too much at once as well, right? Like being able to isolate down what's working, what's not. For us, it really does go back to, the changing ecosystem. There's a lot economically that's always going to affect the way that some of these channels play. We've got, the TikTok potential ban that's still impending, and that will change our media mix. So it's also being nimble about what's working, but then what we might need to kind of double down on or remove based off of the different changes.
And we've got a ton of questions rolling in, so I'm going to start bringing a couple of them in just because I think they're really relevant to the conversations we're having right now. Oliver, I think this one is really great to hear back from you. Just what advice do you have for brands with limited budgets who want to get started with performance-driven media strategies? Kind of where did you start before you brought in Croud, and what did that look like as you were evolving?
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful question, and it's something I think every small brand, as you're scaling up, wrestles with. And I would say it starts with being two main things that you really need to understand. Understand, who are you as a brand? What do you stand for, and what is your voice? Do you have a clear point of view and how you're going to show up in the world? And number two, who is that consumer you're going after? Who is most important for you to go win? If you start with those two questions, then you can start building out those performance marketing metrics, right? Then you know who you can go after, right? And even if you can't partner with a wonderful agency like Croud that can help you bring a lot more rigor in analytics, at least you know what you're going after. You can know what you're trying to buy. And I think that's where we saw a lot of success early, right? We knew we were going to be unapologetically for men. We knew we wanted to talk to guys the way that guys talk to each other, humor, a little bit of a reverence. But at the end of the day, just knowing that we're all about hard work and strong values. Knowing that allowed us to find that audience. We were able to build that and scale that. And now we have the opportunity to bring somebody like Croud on to really start scaling it and finding more like-minded people that we know our message is going to resonate with them. So it really gets back to, basic principles of marketing. Like, what is your brand and why should people care about it? And who is that person that's going to care about it?
Yeah, and just building on that, we love working with brands like Buchanan, not just saying that because Oliver's on the line with me here, but brands like Buchanan who are looking to drive growth and share that same hunger that we do in growing their business. But at the same time, it's being realistic about what we can do and not doing too much at once. We don't want to spread out our budget like peanut butter and not actually be able to see any impact from that. So kind of just bringing it down to start with what is really working? What are those 2 to 3 channels that are really, really working that we want to double down and invest within, prove out that value and grow it from there? I feel like a lot of industry pressure everywhere to be all at once everywhere. And the message then can get lost and not hit your target audience at the right frequency to actually grow brand salience. So it's balancing that, need to grow with also how are we growing in the right way that's going to drive results.
And I think collaboration is so important. It's very clear with the two of you and then Katie, our teams coming together, all with very clear communication up front on what the goal actually is. So knowing that it is driving sales in store at these retailers. And there's been a lot of questions in the chat just on how exactly we're tracking in-store visits, how you're measuring the success, how we saw that sales lift. So Katie, we can probably tag team this, but when it comes to tracking in-store traffic. So Katie and the Croud team came to GroundTruth because of our ability to attribute foot traffic back to media. And we can do that across all the channels that we're currently leveraging. So mobile display banners, connected TV, so for that video investment. And then now as GroundTruth has launched into additional channels like audio, where we can actually measure the impact with foot traffic against some of these previous, I would call more upper funnel. There weren't really a lot of ways in the past to measure the success there. We're able to now do that. So I think that's first and foremost, really being able to drive that success from that aspect. But then Katie, if you want to dive a bit deeper in how we did see that hybrid 6% across the retailers and then 12% at Walmart, where we did see that really great incremental sales lift, what was going on behind the scenes with your team to be able to showcase that effectively?
Yeah, and I hope I do the advanced analytics team justice because they are, way more in the weeds on this than I am. But they really just took a very strong look at what the sales data was coming through and measuring that with counterfactuals against it and just making sure that we were actually seeing that growth in the revenue compared to what we were expecting based off the trend of the last 52 weeks of data before that. So it's really just using that variance from that control to understand the sales lift. But even off the back of that and just looking at revenue, we're also using other tools to measure the success of our campaigns, no matter like what source it's coming from. So again, setting up that KPI framework at the beginning that allows for us to look at those weekly optimization metrics. So for GroundTruth, we're looking at click-through rate. We're looking at the CPMs that we're getting on like more of a month scale. We're looking at those store visits and the cost of that. And then on a broader scale, we're looking at that revenue lift, right? And then for other partners where we may be more in that upper funnel space, as you said, we use third-party tools to look across all of our different sources to see if we are driving brand salience, if we're driving brand consideration, purchase intent, and being able to understand the real segmentation of that. So which vendors are showing more impact? Do we need to up our frequency on certain channels? So it's really great to have a tool like that in your arsenal to understand when it's not dollar to dollar, how are we still seeing impact?
Yeah. And I think too, our teams have been great in terms of being able to pivot and be really fluid with the budgets and the investment as well. So if we do see something working really successfully, how do we continue to invest there and capitalize instead of just being tied to one channel, which I think has been really successful launching into 2025. Oliver, I'd be remiss if I didn't just point out your background right now where you have some of the new packaging. So I think, you are really at a point, I feel like Duke Cannon just in general, it's this really special inflection point where you're changing the game yet again and undergoing the next phase in this, Duke Cannon journey or evolution, which is kicking off this month. So I'd love to hear more. I know we kind of skimmed over creative and the repackaging, but what did specifically influence going in with making sure that everything was very aligned? You might have been discovered previously because people were excited about, the big ass bar of soap, and now it's very clean and cohesive across all of your products. So are you worried about that? Are you worried about people now being able to see it? Or do you think now it's just about going all in, ramping up so that it is recognizable at round 2?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you kind of wrapped up in all the things that excite me and keep me up at night, all in one, right? Look, the reason we're doing all this is we're competitive as heck, right? We want to grow, we want to win, we want to be like the most known men's personal grooming brand. Every guy in America should be using our product. That is our long-term goal, ambition. And like a lot of DC brands, right, we were getting to a point where we were seeing a little bit of plateauing in our growth, and we knew we needed to shake things up a little bit, right? And so we're placing a big bet on the package refresh, and the reason we're doing that, right, is to drive that consistency, to make sure that people can find us more easily, but also to create this cohesion around all of the different product categories that we play in. I think part of the thing that had maybe hypothesized is that maybe has held us back a little bit is that as we start scaling into more channels, FDM, where you have a little bit more of all the products live side by side, people maybe aren't making the connection that Duke Cannon plays in all these different categories, whether it's deodorant, hairstyling, cologne, body wash, all these different things. This allows us a system that now ties the brand together. But we've been very purposeful to say, okay, we can't lose, the voice and the humor that was so prominent on the packaging. And the bet we're placing here is how do we now bring that more to our creative? How do we bring that more to what we do on our various digital channels? How do we think about, the films and the content that we put out there, making sure it leans hard into that voice? Look, if I had a crystal ball and knew that it's going to work perfectly, I wouldn't be sitting here. I am very bullish on all the things that we're doing. The team has worked extremely hard, has been very methodical and strategic, but we're going to learn along the way. As a mentor once told me, right? In marketing, there are very few times that you're going to hit that 10% exponential growth that's going to absolutely set you on this rocket ship. We're also probably only going to hit 10% of that time where you absolutely create the business. And most of the things you do are in that 80%. And the key is to have a learning plan in place, to be nimble, to have those backup plans. And so this is where the conversations that my team and Katie's team are having on a weekly basis to look and evaluate across all of our media spend and say, hey, what's working? What's not working? What learning can we bring from this channel to this other channel? Hey, we did this grouping this way, and this is how we're buying our media on Google. How do we think about that on how it informs our Amazon strategy? And just having that really seamless means of communication is the thing that's going to help us react and respond quickly as we see things that are working well to scale them up, but also the things that aren't working so that we can potentially dial those back. So we're very excited about what's to come, but we don't know. And so we're excited to see it play out over the next few weeks and months.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that. Like with the Duke Cannon team, it's not just been us presenting things back and them reacting to it. It's really been a partnership, and we've built everything together with the media plans, understanding the data, but then also working together to showcase what those results look like. And a lot of that comes with trust in the process too, right? Like it's like Oliver said, we don't know, we don't have a crystal ball, but trust in the process that we're going to be figuring it out together. We're going to understand the data, work together to interpret it and move us forward. And I'm definitely grateful to Duke Cannon to be a partner that's like fully along for that ride.
I think we lost Jessie. It seems like maybe she had a technical glitch. I'm going to jump into the Q&A as well. I think what you're talking about is highly engaging and highly relevant for brands like Duke Cannon and the overall performance space and making these decisions. One of the very specific ways that we think about the full marketing approach is influencer content. And just want to give you the opportunity to speak because it's a very specific creative engagement and how that plays into your decisions about how you diversify your creative set across the different funnel stages. So I'll just tee that one up for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to lean to that. Look, buzzword du jour, right? Like influencers, everyone wants an influencer strategy, but they're critically important, right? It's a new way of going to market. And so something we think about on a regular basis, right? I would say we're still pretty early in our evolution of like how we work with influencers, and we're trying to really learn our way and test our way into that. We've had some good success working with influencers and really leaning hard into some retailer activations and driving, consumers in store and letting them know that our products exist. We're also trying to test a few different things, especially if we launch this new campaign. How do we think about influencers bigger? They clearly have a role. They've got large audiences. But as a brand and making sure that we owned our message, like I always want to make sure we're striking that balance of what is our point of view? What is the thing that we want to know? We want to make sure that people buy our brand because they love our brand, not because they just, like an influencer. And so we got to strike that balance. And some of the conversations we've had with Katie's team quite a bit on just how do we start putting metrics and measure that, right? Like we have to be able to measure the impact with influencers, but the game is changing and evolving constantly, right? And, you think about TikTok and then now TikTok Shop and affiliates and how that plays into the mix. It's just new things that it's exciting to have a partner that we can spar, we can learn, we can test and figure out ways to do it better. But I'd be lying if I told you like I have the perfect answer and know how to do influencer strategy extremely well. We're still learning and testing our way into it. But I don't know, Katie, if you'd add anything more to that.
Yeah, I would say something that, again, with the Quality Meats team that we're really focused on with this repackaging and with this new brand platform is just making sure that translates over to influencers as well, and that they're not kind of going rogue and saying whatever they want about the brands. We want it to align with what we're trying to say in TV spots, right? So like complete opposite ends of the spectrum, but just ensuring that the same message is getting across to consumers at whatever kind of medium they're receiving the message from.
That's great. Welcome back, Jessie.
Hi, Jessie.
I mean, that's
Sorry,
so good. That's so good, right? Hope you didn't have too much fun without me. But
No.
Ryan, thanks for hopping in. Katie, what were you just expanding on?
We were just talking about the influencer strategy for Duke Cannon.
Yeah.
I love that. And I know that there was one other one I wanted to make sure we got to for Oliver. Oliver, I think, we kind of took a deeper dive into how Katie was kind of filtering through all of the different vendors she was going to work with to support your efforts. But I'd love to hear more. And I think it'd be helpful for some other brands to hear, when you were looking to work with new agency partners, what were you looking for specifically? And what did you, throughout the interview process, what did you see from Croud that you felt like was a really good fit? Because it's one thing to work with an agency, but the way you guys have really come together and have showcased that it is truly that synergy, that's just as important to make sure you're getting your brand message across.
Totally. No, I was just looking for who had the best happy hours. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously not. No, look, for me, when I evaluate agencies and different partners, I always start from the mindset of any partner of mine is an extension of my team. And if they're going to be an extension of my team, I need them to understand a few key things. Do they understand the strategy that we're trying to pursue? Do they have the same level of hunger and competitiveness to drive growth for the brand? Those to me are the top two things. It's do they understand what we're trying to do? Are they as hungry to go win as I am and as our team is? And then you start getting into that next level, right? Can they bring new thinking? Can they challenge and push us? Can they bring new ideas? But more importantly, can they measure that? Can they demonstrate that these new tactics and ideas are actually driving impact and growth? I often tell my team, action without impact is often just noise. We need to make sure that the things that we're putting out into the world are actually driving the results that we're trying to create. That starts by creating strong KPIs. That starts by implementing a learning plan and then adapting from that. And I think that's what I saw in Croud from our very first few calls, very much asking deeper questions, pushing us on, are we getting enough measurement? Do we have the right builds in place? Or do we have the right learning plan? And it's been really fun to work with these guys because it's really helped us refocus and ensure that, again, the things that we're doing are actually driving impact to get us to those growth goals that we have. We have ambitious sales targets, so we need partners that are bringing the ideas.
I think that's so great. And then Katie, too, I think on the flip side, what does Croud look for in a brand that you want to work with and you want to go after? I know Duke Cannon's a dream client because you do get to pivot and have fun and that they're open to testing. But what else are you as an agency looking for in a brand partner?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this before, but just again, same thing on this side. We want to be seen as an extension of our clients' teams, and we want to be involved in the day-to-day. We want as much data as possible. Data is our best friend, right? So the more that we can collaborate on that and the more that we can understand past just our media lens, but what is actually happening in the business impact and how integrated can we be with the business, that for us is super important. And we want brands that aren't afraid to be challenged, right? I want to be able to tell you, no, we think you should do this instead, or double down on this, and it be something that's a discussion and not just us as implementers, because any agency can implement for you. We want to help to transform you. So how can we elevate your brand is really what we're looking for. We want that hunger too, shared hunger.
And Oliver, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but nobody has a crystal ball, and they certainly don't in marketing, especially with so much going on in the world. But this is more of a personal curious question. If you did have a magic ball and you were able to kind of see, okay, going through this next repackaging process, you're starting to test these new channels. In a perfect world, what do you hope to see at the end of 2025? Is it being in new retailers outside of just household penetration? Is it, working across multiple mediums? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I love that question. So when I think about the goals that we've established, so I'll say a few things that I want. I want our board to be so ecstatic with our performance that that I'm getting some high fives. Starts there, but to me, it's always the I call it the cocktail hour measurement, right? if I'm at a cocktail party and I'm talking to somebody and I say I work at Duke Cannon, if I can get a few people to be like, oh, you guys did X, Y, or Z, or oh, I saw this thing at X, Y, and Z, especially if I'm looking at that person and say, this is definitely a Duke Cannon man, that to me is the dream, right? Because that's where I know that we hit it exactly how we needed to, that the folks that we're trying to go after are actually seeing our message and it's engaging and connecting and it's sticking with them. Like that to me at the end of the day is why you build a brand. Anybody can sell soap, but there's a reason somebody specifically walks by 6 other brands and picks up your brand is because you created a connection with them, right? And so being able to get that direct feedback, I mean, it's the reason I'm a marketer, right? I love just that, like, you put something out into the world and you very quickly know, you get that scoreboard. People either responded to it and liked it and it drives your business, or nobody cared and you got to try again. So yeah, that's to me, if I had a crystal ball and could, have this conversation at this time next year and we're, touting all the great things that we did in 2025, it's, hey, we drove impact and people noticed.
I think that's incredible. And I think we'll be able to do that next webinar, this time next year, 2026. But I do think overall, just to summarize a lot of what we said, I feel like a lot of it is geared towards marketers needing to guide their decisions based on what's actually working instead of just inferring that it's working, right? Katie, I think that's where that GeoLift test came in. That's where you were testing markets and seeing that the sales lift was there. You weren't just saying, hey, we know that we want reach and impressions. You were really able to attribute results at the end of the day across multiple channels and validating what was actually working to influence what you're doing in 2025 and how you're building on that momentum to kind of get Duke Cannon to the next level. And I think, from media metrics to business metrics, it's all about multiplying. How can you get the most out of those efforts? And when creative matches the end goal, it's this perfect mix that I think we're really starting to get a good handle on. I think, we spent a lot of Q4 to set us up for Q1. And now with March, getting to see all the excitement with the repackaging, new creative launching, and I know some special projects that Oliver, you don't want to chat with. So I think we have some carrots dangling for everybody here. But for those of you joining, we also have some really special case studies that are launching so that you can get a bit more insight into exactly what was done, how Duke Cannon has seen success, how Croud really built the entire plan and this strategic outlook in order to drive really effective results for them. So Oliver, Katie, do you have anything else you want to wrap up with that you want to kind of leave behind for everybody that joined us today?
I would just start with, first off, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jesse, Katie. This has been a lot of fun to chat with it. And I would just say for any marketer out there, just take some shots. I think that's the beauty of today's digital world, right? You get feedback almost immediately. Don't be afraid of taking a shot and go with intuition. We can measure all sorts of different things, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of art to this business, and you got to be able to have a little bit of instinct, intuition, and just take some shots. Take the calculated bet. Because I've found more often than not, like, they do pay off, and you'll be very happy doing that. So also go find great partners like Croud and Quality Meats and GroundTruth. They're the ones that help you make it happen.
Yeah, and similarly, I'll say, trust in the data and, trust that your strategy that you put forward is going to work, but verify it. Make sure that you're not just setting it and forgetting it. Using the data to the best of your ability is going to help you showcase those results to the board or to whatever stakeholders that you have to answer to really be able to continue growing, build that incrementality for your brand. So it's super important to really understand the impact that you're looking for and be able to measure it the right way.
I mean, it's been a dream, I feel like, to work with both of you and just getting to see what we do next as we test new channels and get to just watch what Duke Cannon does next. So everybody go buy a product at a Target, Walmart, or online, find out more. But Ryan, thank you again for having us and the whole Adweek team. It's been a lot of fun getting to showcase this. And I know we're really just getting started.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone.
Oliver, Katie, Jesse, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really educational and engaging conversation that I think is relevant for our audience of marketers. Congratulations on this work and the upcoming things that are happening at Duke Cannon. Big thank you, Jesse, Wonderful hosting, Oliver and Katie. Great content. We look forward to seeing you all on a future Adweek webinar. Thank you.